and General Scoville. I welcome everyone to the Aviation Subcommittee hearing today for an update on the FAA call to action on airline safety and pilot training. I'd like to especially thank and welcome the family members of Flight 3407, some of whom are with us here today. 2 days ago, the NTSB determined the probable cause of the crash of a regional airline near Buffalo, New York, occurring almost a year ago. The crash is considered one of the most significant accidents in recent years because it revealed a gap in the level of safety between major airlines and regional carriers. I want to commend the board for doing an outstanding job. I am hopeful that their safety recommendations to the FAA, many of which are included in our bipartisan legislation, H.R. 3371, the Airline Safety and Pilot Training Improvement Act of 2009, approved overwhelmingly by the House last October, will encourage the FAA and the airline industry to act quickly to improve pilot training standards, address pilot professionalism, fatigue, remedial training, pilot records, install training. After this subcommittee held a hearing on regional air carriers and pilot workforce issues on June 11, 2009, Department of Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood and FAA Administrator Babbitt initiated an airline safety and pilot training call to action to gather information from the airlines and labor organizations to ascertain industry best practices and seek voluntary compliance with a number of safety programs. Last September, this subcommittee held a hearing on the call to action. I praised the FAA's quick reaction to the Colgan tragedy and the lapses in regional carrier safety that it revealed. I put the FAA on notice then that I would hold a follow-up hearing to examine the call to action final report, and today's hearing will be an opportunity for Administrator Babbitt to provide this subcommittee with an update and to hear from the Department of Transportation Inspector General on his assessment of the FAA's progress. Administrator Babbitt in the call to action final report acknowledged that, and I quote, "This is a snapshot of our work, which is by no means finished. We will continue to aggressively push forward with these initiatives that we believe will raise the safety bar even higher," end of quote. We want to work with you, Administrator Babbitt, to achieve these goals you have set forth, and I believe the real measure of the agency's success will be whether it can successfully drive its safety initiatives to a timely conclusion. I respect and appreciate the FAA's determination since our last hearing in September to set aggressive deadlines to develop key safety initiatives. My concern is not simply that the FAA is a few months behind on any one rule. I am concerned that these delays stem from historic patterns of industry opposition to any form of regulation, and that key safety reforms have not been implemented nearly a year after 50 people died on Flight 3407, despite promises of swift action from the FAA. As I have said before, I believe that unless this subcommittee in Congress pursues aggressive oversight, our legislative mandates are in place, the time it takes for the FAA to address the most critical safety issues raised by the accident is far too long. That is why we introduced H.R. 3371 to address many of these issues raised in the call to action. I want to discuss the status of several key FAA safety initiatives discussed in the call to action final report. First, in 1995, the FAA proposed a fatigue rule based on the recommendations of an aviation rulemaking committee. We have waited 15 years and we are still waiting for a final rule. Last year, the FAA withdrew the 1995 proposal, formed another ARC, and planned to publish another fatigue proposal by the end of 2009. Yet, we are now being told that the FAA's date to publish a rule has already slipped to the spring of 2010. Second, in January of 2009, the FAA published a proposal to overhaul crew training regulations that included increased use of flight simulators and stronger upset recovery training requirements, something that the NTSB has recommended and that we have mandated in H.R. 3371. Administrator Babbitt, you testified before the subcommittee last June that the FAA's proposal was, quote, "the most comprehensive upgrade to FAA training requirements in 20 years, end of quote. After extending the comment period, the FAA received 3,000 pages of comment and now plans to revise and republish its proposal in the spring. Finally, the call to action plan states that DOT and FAA reviewed code share arrangements between air carriers and their regional partners. This is particularly important given that the majority of air travelers are unaware when they purchase a ticket from a mainline airline that they may actually fly on a regional airline. In fact, the NTSB expressed the need to look more closely at safety issues surrounding code share arrangements during its February 2, 2010 meeting on the Colgan Final Accident Report. Chairman Oberstar and I have requested that the Department of Transportation's Inspector General conduct a review of domestic code share relationships. There have also been positive developments resulting from the FAA's call to action that we should not ignore. For example, more airlines appear to be willing to adopt voluntary safety best practices like establishing flight operations quality assurance programs. However, the FAA and this subcommittee will need to follow up in the coming months to see if carriers actually follow through on their commitments that they have made. In addition, the FAA published an advance notice proposed rulemaking yesterday to strengthen the training requirements and the flight hours necessary to be an airline first officer. I will continue to keep my commitment to exercise aggressive oversight to strengthen airline safety and pilot training qualification standards. I assure the families of Flight 3407, those who are with us today and those who could not be here today, and the American people that we will continue to push for the provisions of H.R. 3371 that requires the first officer to hold an air transport pilot certificate, in addition to receiving training to function effectively in an air carrier operational environment and know how to fly in adverse weather conditions, including icing.